This is the last photo of 21-year-old Sophie Lionnet, taken just 2 days before she was tortured, killed, and then burned on a garden bonfire by the very people who hired her as their nanny. And why they did it shocked just about everyone. Here are evil couples who brutally killed their babysitters. September 2017, Southfields, London. The fire brigade arrives expecting a routine call. A backyard fire that seemed dangerously close to a house in this well-to-do London suburb. But when one firefighter stamped out the flames, he made a discovery that would shock this quiet community to its core.
I disappeared at the back for a while, and when I came out, it was carnage.
Buried between the ashes, the charred remains of Sophie Lionnet, a 21-year-old nanny from rural France. Almost immediately, her employers, Sabrina Quider and her partner Usi Medouni, were charged with the murder. Sophia grew up in the village of Perron, only a couple of hours south of Paris. Her mother said that she was shy and loved working with children.
She was shy, yes. We spoke very little. It was always necessary to tear the words from her mouth.
So when a friend showed her an advertisement for a French-speaking nanny position in London, Sophie saw it as a temporary opportunity to gain experience and improve her English.
So she said to herself that since I cannot get work in France, I'm going to England because it would be temporary.
A little did Sophie know, the next time she'd return home, she'd do so in a casket. January 2016, just after her 20th birthday, Sophie arrives in London to work for Quider's family. At first, she seemed happy. Local shop owners remember her as quiet and timid, always with the children. She looked so young that one shop owner recalls thinking she was a child herself.
I can remember when she first asked for cigarettes, I had to ask for ID because she looked quite well under 18.
But now, behind this facade of a successful and glamorous family, something entirely else was developing. Sabrina Quider had a dark obsession with her celebrity ex-boyfriend, Mark Walton, a founding member of the Irish boy band Boyzone.
She said that he was controlling her with black magic and all sorts of things.
Their relationship ended back in 2013, but Quider became fixated on getting revenge. Her mental state declined even further when Walton moved to LA and became completely unreachable. So she ended up projecting all her rage onto the only vulnerable person in her household, Sophie. By June 2017, Quider's control over Sophie was becoming a problem. She stopped paying Sophie's wages and even prevented her from eating properly. People who knew Sophie said they noticed a dramatic change in her demeanor around this time.
Whenever she comes, I offer her food. She only has a portion of chips and a drink, and she eats it so fast. I used to see her with the same top, same jeans, and she never brushes her hair.
Then finally, Quider isolated Sophie from the outside world entirely. When Sophie tried to arrange visits home to see her sick mother, Quider wouldn't even let her leave. But the situation only got worse from there. She became convinced that Sophie was actually working with Mark Walton to spy on her and destroy her life.
She concocted in her head a bizarre idea that there was a plot against her and Medouni.
This delusion, shared by her partner Medouni, led to weeks of brutal interrogation. What happened next was captured on hours of horrifying audio recordings that would later be played in court. For 5 weeks before her death, Sophie was subjected to relentless questioning sessions. Quider and Medouni recorded these interrogations on their mobile phones, which would later become crucial evidence.
I'll not leave you alone until you tell me the truth. Is this clear? Do you understand? I'm gonna spoil your life as you've spoiled mine. Imagine yourself every day in a cage like an animal.
The recordings revealed that Sophie was verbally abused, threatened with 40 years in prison, and beaten with electrical cords. As the weeks progressed, the abuse became more violent. Sophie suffered 4 broken ribs and a cracked sternum 3 days before her death, and on the night she died, she had a broken jaw. The final recording showed Sophie, incredibly thin and completely broken, being forced to confess to working with Mark Walton, which was a complete fabrication born from Quider's delusions.
They ground it down so much that that in hours before her death, they filmed her actually confessing to colluding with Mark Walton,
says Emily Penning, who listened to the recordings in their entirety.
It was clearly completely untrue. It was a figment of Sabrina Quadier's imagination.
September 18th, 2017. After enduring yet another brutal torture session, Sophie's body finally gave out. But instead of calling for help, the couple made the decision to dispose of that body as fast as possible. And so they placed Sophie in their own suitcase and built a bonfire in their garden. September 19th, neighbors noticed the fire and called emergency services.
My husband, he went to the corner shop, and as he passed the house, he noticed the smoke. And he thought it was very close to the end of the house.
Firefighters immediately arrive and put out most of the fire, but when one of them decides to stamp out the remaining flames, he discovers fingers, limbs, and a part of a nose in the ashes. Maduni, still attempting to cover up the crime, told firefighters it was the carcass of a sheep he'd bought at the market, but the authorities weren't buying this, and they arrested the couple, charged them with murder. During the trial at the Old Bailey, both Quadier and Maduni denied murder, each blaming the other.
They both argued that they were asleep whilst the other person had carried out the murder.
But the evidence was overwhelming. A key witness heard both defendants in the bathroom with Sophie during her final moments. But the most disturbing part was the complete lack of remorse shown by either defendant throughout the whole trial.
And I think Sabrina was so wrapped up in herself and her own world that Sophie really didn't matter.
After 30 hours of deliberation, the jury finds both Sabrina Quadier and Usem Maduni guilty of murder. The case raised difficult questions about why Sophie didn't try to escape. Experts explain that she had been psychologically trapped through coercive control, threatened with arrest if she tried to leave, and completely isolated from any support system. June 6, 2018, Sophie Lionnet was finally returned home to France and laid to rest. But while Quadier's obsession with a celebrity ex led to delusion and murder, the next case shows how a different kind of twisted thinking can turn trusted caregivers into killers. September 2011, Ogden, Utah. They were known throughout the neighborhood as the drug-dealing couple with the chaotic household. But when Lexi agreed to babysit their children one Saturday night, she had no idea she would never make it home alive. Alexis Rasmussen, aka Lexi, was the kind of teenager who learned lessons the hard way. Lexi lived with her parents and 3 siblings in Ogden, Utah, a picturesque mid-sized town just north of Salt Lake City. But like many teenagers, Lexi was drawn to the wrong crowd. She started experimenting with drugs and alcohol, even running away from home a few times, though she'd usually just spend nights at a friend's house before returning home. Now things take a turn for the worse when Lexi learned about Eric and Dia Millerberg, a couple living across the street who were notorious in the neighborhood for selling drugs. Eric and Dia were both in their late 30s, but they constantly threw parties where the only attendees were teenagers. Eric had tattoos covering his body, including a teardrop tattoo under one eye, usually found in prison, and he just so happens to be a member of the white supremacists, the Silent Aryan Warriors, where his nickname was Rooster because of his bright red hair. Yet despite these obvious red flags, Lexi became one of their biggest customers, initially buying alcohol from them, but eventually graduating to harder drugs. Now by the spring of 2011, Lexi and Dia became close friends. Now Eric and Dia also had 2 small children living in this chaotic drug house, and when they asked Lexi to babysit so they could go out, she agreed, seeing this as an opportunity to make some money. September 10th, 2011, Lexi goes to the Millerberg house to babysit while Eric and Dia go out to buy decorations for their daughter's upcoming birthday. And throughout the evening, Lexi texted with her mother, Dawn, and everything seemed normal. And then around 11:30 p.m., Lexi tells her mom that Eric and Dia returned briefly but were going out again, and that they were going to be gone for a while. So Dawn tells Lexi to spend the night, since it's going to be late by the time they return. That was the last time anyone heard from Lexi. The morning of September 11th, when Lexi didn't come home, Dawn became worried. She drove to the Millerberg house. Eric and Dia claimed that when they returned around 11:30 p.m., Lexi already left to meet a friend. But then Dawn contacted this friend, and he confirmed that while he and Lexi had indeed been texting that night, they never actually met up. That's when they called the police, who initially treated Lexi's disappearance as just a teenage runaway case. case, and for weeks, the community tried to find Lexi. A friend of hers sung on YouTube to raise awareness about her disappearance. But despite all the effort, Lexi was nowhere to be found. So, police turned their attention to the Millerbergs. October 3rd, 2011. Both Eric and Dia are arrested, but not for Lexi's disappearance. You see, Dia, who was a nurse, was arrested for prescription fraud, and Eric violated his probation by failing a drug test and was sent to prison for 5 years. But the real breakthrough comes when two of Eric's fellow gang members contacted the authorities. A man named Eric Peanut Smith revealed that Eric called him on the night of Lexi's disappearance, asking him to bring a car and not ask questions. And when Peanut got to the house the next day, Eric told him that he needed help moving a body. So Eric claimed that Lexi OD'd at their house and that he and Dia had to dump their body in the woods off the highway. Eric was worried that Lexi's body wasn't hidden well enough, so he and Peanut move it deeper into the forest and even try to dig a grave. But when the ground proved too rocky, they decided to place Lexi's body in a trash bag. October 18, 2011, 5 weeks after Lexi disappeared, Peanut finally led investigators to that dump site. They find the body of a teenage girl folded into the fetal position, partially stuffed in a trash bag, and so badly decomposed it was difficult to even identify. However, her neon-colored toenail polish, jewelry, and jawline convinced officers they found Lexi. And just 4 days later, fingerprints and dental records confirmed their worst fears.
I had no idea that they were capable of doing something like this.
The autopsy showed that Lexi had enough drugs in her system to kill her 7 times over.
She passed away at their residence, and that it was the result of a drug overdose.
Other inmates soon came forward, claiming Eric openly discussed killing Lexi in prison. When confronted with the evidence, Dia confessed to everything. She revealed that on September 10th, instead of going shopping for those birthday decorations, they actually decided to get high with Lexi. According to Dia's confession, Eric injected drugs into Lexi's neck, an extremely dangerous method, typically used when a person has no other visible veins on their body. The drug hits faster, and it's a lot more likely to be lethal. So if that's not bad enough, the couple then rapes her. Yeah, Eric then prepares another syringe for Lexi, who, by that point, was already barely conscious. And soon after this final injection, Lexi began shaking, saying she's cold, which are both signs of an impending OD. Dia later gives her a warm bath, but when she checks on her 45 minutes later, she was still cold. Dia wraps Lexi in a blanket and puts her on the bed, while she and Eric go outside to smoke. And when they get back a half an hour later, Lexi's unresponsive and not breathing. But instead of calling for help, the couple panics about going to prison and losing their children. So they dress up her body, place it in the trunk, and drive it around town looking for a place to hide it. They settle on this remote area near I-84, dig a shallow grave, and cover the body with a blanket. To destroy evidence, they throw away Lexi's purse and the trunk in random dumpsters, then remove the carpet from their car and disposed of that as well. Then they thought they got away with it. But in court, Dia pled for a more lenient sentence and agreed to testify against her husband. She even addressed Lexi's family.
I'm appalled and disgusted by what I've done. Here's my prayers, and I hope one day you'll be able to forgive me.
But this apology came too little and too late. January 2012. Eric's charged with child physical assault homicide, obstruction of justice, unlawful sexual activity with a minor, as well as abuse and desecration of a human body. Dia was charged with desecrating a body, obstructing justice, and illegally obtaining drugs. But because she wasn't as involved as Eric, and because she agreed to testify against him, she only ends up serving 4 years and was released back in October 2019. June 2016, Adelaide, Australia. This 19-year-old babysitter thought she was going to work a normal shift watching a couple's young daughter, but instead, she's accused of being a snitch, kidnapped, and then subjected to 18 hours of torture so brutal that investigators called it some of the worst cruelty they'd ever seen. June 16th, 2016. The evening started as usual for the 19-year-old babysitter. She and her roommate go to the Elizabeth Park home of Joshua Gent, age 29, and Kira Baker, age 28, to watch their daughter while the couple went out for the evening. The babysitter had worked for him before and was pretty happy to be here. She had no way of knowing, though, that Gent and Baker were, in fact, both heavy drug users, whose paranoia was starting to escalate more and more each day. 12:30 a.m. When the couple return to their home, they're in a drug-fueled rage. They accuse their babysitter of being a snitch who reported their friend to the police over a stolen car. The accusation was completely false, but in their drug-addled state, Gent and Baker were convinced she betrayed them. Now, what happens next would be described by Judge Jack Costello as mindless, cruel, and sadistic violence. Baker and Gent called their friends Patrick Breen and Stacy Gaffney and asked them to come over. Then all four proceeded to tie up this terrified teenager with a dressing gown cord, gagged her with an onion, and then throw her in the trunk of the car. They drive all the way to Breen and Gaffney's house in Elizabeth North, and when they arrived, that's when the 18-hour nightmare really started. They decide the babysitter was a dog who needed to be taught her place, and so they put a leash around her neck, the same one seen here, and dragged this poor girl around the house while filming the torture. Joshua Gent forced a dog collar around her neck and shoved squeaky toys into her mouth, making her bark like a dog, while the others filmed and laughed. But it wouldn't stop here. They would force her to eat pet food from a bowl on the floor. The torture escalates even further when they decide to brand her. Oh, they heat up a pipe until it reaches extreme temperatures, and then just singe her repeatedly. Photos of the aftermath paint a picture of this woman who most likely will have to bear these scars for the rest of her life. Even more shocking though was that Gaffney's toddler was in another room during this entire ordeal, sleeping while they were torturing just feet away. So after 18 hours of this nightmare, they finally drive the babysitter to this remote area in the Adelaide Hills and dumped her, warning her that if she went to police, they would find her and finish what they started. The babysitter, barely conscious and just covered in burns and bruises, manages somehow to find help and was rushed to the hospital. The extent of her injuries was so severe that doctors initially feared for her life. Police were called, and their investigation revealed the full extent of this torture. And the evidence was overwhelming. The perpetrators recorded their own crimes and kept the videos on the victim's stolen phone. When the case goes to court, the victim is so traumatized that she can't even read her own impact statement. Prosecutor Kelly Smith had to read it for her.
I find it hard to do day-to-day activities such as going out to public places because I feel like I will see the offenders. The experience has left me with disturbed sleep, overwhelming fear, and an inability to enjoy life in a normal way.
The victim psychologist then stands up and tells the court,
quite simply, she has been robbed of her ability to enjoy life. Any prospect of her resuming something approaching a normal life, even in the medium to long term, remains quite unclear.
The four defendants eventually pleaded guilty to various charges, but their sentences reflected the severity of their crimes and their roles in the torture. September 2017, Joshua Gent, identified as the ringleader, received the harshest sentence, 9 years, 2 months, and 1 week in jail, with a minimum of 9 years to serve. The judge noted that Gent orchestrated the torture and showed absolutely no remorse for his actions. Kira Baker, his former partner, was given 6 years and 2 months in prison, with a minimum of 6 to serve. Despite being a mother herself, though, she participated enthusiastically in torturing someone else's child. And Patrick Bean, who even conducted internet searches on how to terrify someone who's been kidnapped, received 3 years and 11 months in jail. The judge noted that his research showed that he was dead set on traumatizing this babysitter. Stacy Gaffney, playing a lesser role but allowing the torture to happen in her home with her toddler sleeping nearby, received a 14-month suspended sentence. Now, she's the only one who avoided immediate jail time. We don't know why. The babysitter, who turned 21 by the time of sentencing, faced what experts described as a lifetime of healing. The scars on her body would eventually fade. The psychological scars of being tortured by people she trusted to keep her safe, that's going to take a lot longer to heal, if they heal at all. Now, our final case shows us that the vulnerability of domestic workers isn't limited to one country or culture. It's, in fact, a worldwide problem that too often ends in tragedy. October 2024, Chennai, India. This unnamed teenager was working as a babysitter for nearly a year, sending money back to her widowed mother in a small village. On Diwali, also known as India's Festival of Lights, celebrating the triumph of good over evil, her employers decided that she hadn't been working hard enough. December 2023, the teenage girl from Thanjavur had every reason to hope for a better future when she arrived in Chennai, the capital city of Tamil Nadu. She took on the responsibility responsibility of being her family's primary breadwinner right after her father's death. Now, her mother, a single parent struggling to survive in their small village, sends her daughter to work as a babysitter for Mohammed Nishad, a 36-year-old car dealer, and his wife, Nevada, also known as Nazia, 30 years old. They live in this upscale Eden Castle apartment building in Meda Nagar, Amin Jikarai, which was a world away from the girl's rural origins. And for nearly 11 months, everything was fine. But suddenly, it takes a turn for the worse. Her employers, along with a network of friends and relatives, subjected her to escalating abuse that the police believe lasted for at least 3 months before her death. October 31st, 2024. The girl's ordeal reaches its climax on Diwali, the Hindu festival of lights. Now, this tragic irony wasn't lost on investigators. On this day, Mohammed Nishad and his wife decided their teenage employee wasn't working hard enough for him. So according to police investigations, they frequently assaulted the girl whenever they felt she was underperforming or slacking in her household duties. But this time, the beating was different. This time, they didn't stop. The assault was so severe that this poor girl collapses in the bathroom and dies from her injuries. And when her employers realize that she's dead, they lock the house and attempt to flee. When police finally catch up to the Eden Castle apartments, the scene they found was one of horrific abuse. This girl's body bore telltale marks of torture that painted a picture of months of cruelty. Investigators found cigarette burns covering her body, evidence that they used her as a human ashtray for their entertainment. But even more disturbing were the burn marks from a hot iron, suggesting they branded her like an animal when they felt she'd misbehaved. The injuries were so extensive and so clearly the result of prolonged torture that police immediately suspected this wasn't an isolated incident, but rather the culmination of months of escalating abuse. The investigation quickly expands beyond the immediate employers. Police arrest 6 people in connection with the teenager's death, revealing a network of complicity in her torture and murder. Along with Mohammed Nishad and his wife Nevada, police arrest Nishad's sister, Seema Begum, who had knowledge of the abuse but decided not to intervene. The couple's friends, Lokesh and his wife Jayasakti, were also arrested for their roles in the torture. Most disturbingly, we have Maheswari, a 40-year-old domestic helper who witnessed this whole abuse and did nothing. Her silence therefore enabled this couple and their accomplices to carry on unbothered. Police filed charges under multiple laws, including the Protection of Children from Sexual Offenses Act, or POCSO for short. They argued that this abuse may have included sexual violence in addition to physical torture. Murder charges were filed against all 6 defendants. Advocates would point out that the practice of employing children from poor backgrounds for domestic chores like cleaning, babysitting, and cooking has been a long-standing issue in India. The lack of regulation and oversight creates conditions where abuse can flourish if left unchecked. The girl's case draws comparisons to similar abuse faced by domestic workers in other countries, specifically in the Middle East, where women from India and other South Asian countries have been reported abused by their employers, who view them just as property rather than actual human beings. When the 6 defendants stood before the Chennai court, they were remanded to judicial custody pending trial. The charges they faced could result in life imprisonment or even the death penalty if convicted. The investigation would reveal that this poor teenage girl endured her torture in complete silence. She never reached out for help, but whether that was because she feared her employers, didn't know her rights, or had nowhere to turn remains unclear.